Well, hi again everybody. Welcome to my latest video. I thought I'd kick this one off today by doing it in vlogging mode. I've had the Sony ZV-1 camera in front of me on the Bluetooth grip that I purchased with it. How does it look? Well, today I'm covering part 2 of my Sony ZV-1 product review with a particular focus on those features that I find will be most useful for my content creation. Hopefully you get something out of this, and if you do, please consider doing me a favor and subscribing to my channel. Okay, here's the view of the actual screen, obviously blown up because I'm projecting it through the HDMI port. And this is what you would normally see. Just to show you some of the things that are here, if you look in the upper right hand corner, it shows you the battery charge level and the fact that I have it plugged in right now. And it's plugged in using micro USB connector to a regular electric outlet. It tells me how much time I have available on the actual card at this mode, which is, if you look in the top center to the right a little bit, it says high def 30p, 30 frames per second, and we have 2 hours and 25 minutes of record time in that. I am in mode movie programmed priority. P mode is what they call it most often. That's all the way on the left. And then you see over to the right, you see things that might be of interest, like it's got auto white balance set up and some other standard options that are established. I don't have any fancy backgrounds. A little paintbrush there in the bottom right talks about. On the bottom, you see what I have. It's set for 1/15 of a second if we were taking a still picture, f2.8. I don't have any exposure compensation turned on. That's the plus minus 0.0, and the ISO is set for 3200. I believe the A says that it's in auto mode, and we'll see that when I get to it. Let me go through some of the menus here. First, let me go through the quicker ones. The button right at the top of the camera that says mode. You click on it, this is what you get. It shows you with the little right in the center over to the right, you see a little gray dash that shows the mode that's currently selected, and it describes it here in the upper part of the screen. It's movie mode. And if I click enter on that, I have an option on the movie mode. It's right now set for programmed auto, the P mode. I could also set it for aperture priority movie mode, shutter priority, or manual mode. But we'll leave it as this. I can either hit the center button or I can hit the menu button to get up. So I'll just click the center button so we get out of that. And there's a lot of different modes that you can pick. There's the intelligent auto movie mode. It automatically determines the scene and shoots the appropriate movie settings for it. Now, starting with the screen camera, these are the features for still pictures. The first one here is the intelligent auto, the same as the one for the video. And then we have the program auto for still pictures, and the aperture priority, and the shutter priority, and finally the manual mode. We also have sweep panorama. We have scene selection, background scenes that is, that we can select from. We have memory recall. The thing actually has memorization of certain settings that you've done, and you can set them in there and recall them when you want. You have high film rate. That's basically for slow motion. You click on that, and we get to pick different choices. Same thing. Program mode, high film rate, aperture mode, and shutter, and finally manual. The movie modes again. So this is the quick one that you get when you hit the mode button on the top. Now if you hit in the back the button that is for function, FN it has on it, now you got the quick function that takes shortcuts through the menus. Each one of these points to some internal menu, which is, we'll look at some of them. It's not trivial to get through some of those menus on a Sony camera, as I've learned. So they put the most popular. These are the ones that came by default. So the audio level, the focus modes, for example, right now, if I click the center button, these are all the different focus modes I can have. Only the ones that are highlighted actually allow me to do it for this mode that I have the camera in. That's one of the things you have to be aware of. That some of these modes, like autofocus, automatic AF, it won't work in the mode that I have selected right now, the P mode. But the AF continuous autofocus will. So when you see something with a white background, that means that is something that is usable. And I could again hit either the center button to select it or just hit menu to cancel. Then here we pick the focus area, and there's a lot of choices to that. I have it set for zone. It zones on the screen. I can change that to a center focus, a point spot focus, an expanded flexible spot. That one does not apply. Tracking expand flexible spot to the mode that we're in, and then back to the top to a wide focus area. So we'll leave it in zone. That's the default, and I'll leave it at that. And that's what it's doing. It's picking those zones to focus on, pretty much the center section of the screen. And then this is the exposure compensation. It's sort of an advanced feature I'm not going to go into that too much, but it allows you to adjust the exposure level. It has defaults that are programmed into the camera. This allows you to increase it or decrease it by 1/3 increments. So it can go from -3 to +3, but in the mode that I'm in, it can only go from -2 to +2. Okay, so different modes will change different choices. The ISO is currently auto, or you could decide you want to set it to something manual. So I can set it to 125, 160, 200, all the way up to a certain point, but some of the options are not available because of the movie P mode that I'm currently in. I'll leave it on auto, so it automatically picks the right ISO. And right now, for example, on the screen, it has picked an ISO of 1000. You want to get the ISO as low as possible because very high values of the ISO cause video noise. It's an imperfection caused by the fact that there's not enough light. So if you wind up with a very high ISO lot like that, you might be best to pick a different mode that you can adjust to a wider f-stop or a slower speed of the shutter. Generally, you want the speed to be twice the speed that you are doing frames per second. So right now, the 1/30th is really not ideal for photographic purposes. That's sort of a off-the-cuff rule that photographers use, mostly for still pictures, though. Well, here's the product showcase. I'll show that later. That's a very good feature, and right now it's turned off. I can go ahead and click on this, and it's only an on or an off. I will leave it off for now. And then here's where you could change the exposure mode as well. Just like we did with hitting the mode button at the top, we can change it here too. So I won't do that. The ND filter, neutral density filter, it basically adds an even, mostly a non-interfering, higher density filter to this lens, which will automatically make it so that you can pick on very bright sunlight days, for example, you don't want it to pick really high speed. So if you put a neutral density filter on, and there's a few choices to which level of neutral density, you can adjust that and cause the speed of the shutter to come down from a very high value. Won't play with that right now. Creative styles, I'll leave that up to you to read. It's in auto white balance right now. I don't have the soft skin effect turned on, but I do have the steady shot, basically the stabilization set for the standard, the middle mode. And the video that I did introducing this part of my review was done with this setting. So those are the quick settings that you have available to you. And then as I start demonstrating some of the features that I will use when I'm creating content, which is the main purpose of this video, I will show you how I did it in the certain menus along the way. But this should be good enough for a basic introduction to some of the quick functions. Okay, here's what you have to do to turn it into high heat mode so it won't stop automatically when it gets to a moderately high temperature. You have to go into the setup screen area, which is a little toolbox. The second icon from the right, tab with that icon on it. Then we have to go to the second screen, and if you go down here to auto power off temp, you want that set to high. By default, it's set to the standard. You want the high, and that's how you set that feature. And once you've done that, you're good to go. I want to cover some of the specific features that I have rated and given my own scoring system that'll help me in terms of creating my tech YouTube content. I actually went ahead and created a spreadsheet. It has 59 different items on it, and they go just about every feature that is published by Sony, plus a few others that other people have noticed that I saw online. I think I got them all covered, but at least I got the covered ones that I wanted to rate. What I'm going to do now is go over the 12 best features, the ones that I think really helps this camera serve my purpose, and the 10 worst features. So that's 22 features out of a total of 59 that I rated. I'm going to put up on the screen right now a copy of the spreadsheet that I used to make that judgment. In this first page, I have the first half of the spreadsheet shown. So you can see the first 30 or so features that I've rated. And you see the columns that I've created, including a weight and a score for each item, and then a total score for each item. And then I sorted it first by alphabetical by the name of the feature, and then secondly by the weight, and then third by the actual overall score. And in the second page, you see the remaining features, and you see the ones that have red scores. Those are negative numbers. So the total range that's available here is from a positive 100 down to a negative 85. The worst it could have been was a negative 100, but nobody reached that. But now I'm going to go over each of the top 12 and describe to you why I rated them as I did. Number 12 was the PC remote control and transfer of data through the USB cable. A really nice feature that I really didn't hear anybody else talk about, but it's there and I tested it and it worked. By the way, you also have a smartphone feature that didn't make the list. It's on there, but it's like 14 or 15, so I didn't put it in the top 12. But I'm going to cover both of those features, plus a little more in terms of the grip remote control, which we have right here that you've seen before, and show you which ones are better, which ones have good features, and how to set them up more importantly. And each one uses different technology. This one here we know uses Bluetooth. The other two, one uses the actual USB cable connecting, and the smartphone one actually uses Wi-Fi. But I won't get into that on this video. I'll be making another video that goes into that in detail. I think that's what I'll cover in that video, but we'll see. There is one other one in that same category. So number 11 was the HDMI port and having a clean output. Now you've already seen some of that when I showed the menus, and I'll show again another menu in a little bit, onto the screen for you to look at in detail, nice and clear. Well, you can also do that with what the camera lens sees, with none of the menus in the background. If you choose it that way, it's an option that you can set one way or the other. Now in the score category of 90, I had 3 items. Number 10 was there's no record limit as long as you enable a feature, the feature called the high heat feature, which basically gets a little more allowance into the heat level within the camera. Now the camera does get warm. I don't feel it getting hot. It's so convenient to have no limit. You don't want the camera shutting off. And I understand that the other Sony compact cameras do that. Once you get to about 5.5 minutes of recording, especially in 4K, the heat gets to a point where it just shuts the camera off. Then number 9 in that same 90 category, the face priority auto exposure. So you saw some of that when I was out earlier today and I went through the neighborhood. It was set to that feature on, so it took priority for exposure on my face. And as I went in and out of the sun, in and out of shadows, all different types of light outside, it did a pretty good job, I thought, in keeping exposure correct to my face. The background changed. Sometimes it got washed out, sometimes it was too dark, but it put priority on the face. I thought that was important. Then number 8 in that same 90 category is the bokeh mode. It comes from the photography mode of portrait mode, if you ever look it up. And it gives that nice blurry background to it. It gives the impression you have a more professional camera. It does it by actually adjusting the f-stop on the camera. So it doesn't do it like the iPhone does it. It doesn't simulate it in software. Now the next category is the ones that got a score of 95. And in that category we have 2 items. Number 7, the USB webcam feature. Now that's not available yet. It's been announced by Sony and it will be released, I believe, in August sometime. I tried to find out the details of that, but I couldn't. I'm not sure if it's purely a firmware change or purely PC change software. I'd prefer a firmware change. That way we know it's with the camera at all times and it's not dependent on what drivers or software you have loaded on your PC or what brand of PC or operating system you have. If some of you happen to know or have done that search and found it, so just put a comment down below if you don't mind. I'd really appreciate it. The next one in the category of 95 is the product showcase. Now I've already demonstrated that a little bit, even though I didn't announce it. So when I hold something up to the camera, it takes the focus over from my face and my face gets a little bit blurry. So whatever I hold, and in my case I'm not showing product as much as computer parts. So here's a 8 gigabit DIMM memory stick. In its box, of course, but I could be showing it outside the box. And here's a 480 gigabyte solid state drive. So it's able to take over and focus on the object that's closest to the lens and defocus me. I don't have to hold my hands in front of my face to defocus myself, like you've probably seen if you looked at some of my other videos. Oh, by the way, as long as I'm at that, I wanted to mention that my last video I had a problem, as you may have noticed, toward the end when I was trying to hook up this lapel mic, this exact one, to this camera. I switched it over from my Panasonic and I started getting a clicking that seemed to match my walking. I'm not sure, I thought I was hitting something, but it turns out the battery in my mic and the preamp needed replacement. So now that I've replaced that battery in this preamp for this mic that I happen to have, it's a wired mic, the clicking went away. So I just want to let everybody know that. So moving on, the final category, the most important category as far as I'm concerned. Actually, if any of these things were not there, I probably wouldn't have bought it. That's how important all 5 of these are. And they happen to work out in the same order I would have put them in if I wanted to be specific. So starting number 5 would have been my 5th one. And that is the improved fast autofocus in real time. We're talking about super fast autofocus, as you can see. If I go off camera and then I come back on, it focuses rather quickly onto me, doesn't it? That's a nice one. It tracks you along the way. Well, number 4 is the flip out screen. Oh, can't tell you how important that is. I like seeing the screen. It does distract me a little bit. So sometimes I'm looking at the screen rather than the lens. You may be able to see my eyes are not necessarily on you. So I have to try to always keep myself looking at the lens. Although I really can't see the lens right now, the camera's in the dark. I can see the screen. I can also see the little red light, which is another feature that didn't make the top 12, but it's a nice feature, the record light, as opposed to having to see the little REC written on the screen. The flip out, fully articulating screen is very important. And I'm surprised with Sony that this is the first time they're putting it on these compact cameras, because they have it on other cameras of theirs. The cinema cameras, for example, the ones that are many thousands of dollars, they should have been able to do it sooner. Not sure why. Then we have the external microphone, and that is critical. I always tend to use the external microphone. Very rarely would I use the camera microphone, although this one is a higher quality, so I may do that more often on the outside if I don't have my mic with me. Assuming I also have the wind muff with me, because without the wind muff, it's just as bad. Number 2, being able to charge the battery and record simultaneously. I'm doing it right now. I actually have, and I'll unplug it temporarily to show you, I actually have the USB plugged into the power with a USB power adapter to 120 volt, being one that's 1.5 amps. Now that's important. One thing you have to remember with this, it has to be at least 1.5 amps, and I believe this is like 2.1. If it's less than 1.5 amps, that explains why some people had cases where the battery still discharged, even though they had it plugged into the power. If you can't get enough current out of that adapter, then the battery has to make up for it. And then finally, the most important thing, it's the de facto standard these days on YouTube, 4K recording. That's what we're doing right now. And if it couldn't do that, forget it. Only thing I was looking for lately was a backup camera that's 4K. You gotta be 4K, and this camera supports up to 4K 30. It also does 4K 24, not that much of a difference. If you can't do that, you're gonna be second string videos. So that was critical, absolutely critical for my content. Now let me go through the ones that are the worst features, or the negative features, are the ones that don't help. And I'll do it in reverse order again. I'll start with the one that was, and there was only one in this category, of negative 30 score. No USB Type-C connector. Now, the fact that it doesn't have that connector itself doesn't bother me. So I'm sort of reserving judgment. This one could drop much worse on the list if I find out that it interferes with the performance of turning this camera into a USB camera, because I want to use this when I want high quality video on USB. If it can't be 4K because it can't handle the throughput, because we're not connected to a USB 3.1 or 3.2, that's going to be a problem. That'll cause some complaints for me. Now in the negative 42 score category, I have 3 things. I have number 9, which is the fact that you can only do 24mm close-ups, and it gets worse than that. It turns into maybe like a 28 or 30mm when you turn active stabilization on. Even though this grip is nice, it's not long enough to account for the cropping that will be done. Then number 8 is the lowered screen brightness when you're in 4K. Now right now it's not a problem. It's inside. The camera's in the dark because I have other lights on me that are not on the camera. I can see that pretty clearly. So number 7 is there's no weather sealing. If you get caught out in the rain when you're trying to do something outside, if it's summer for example and you don't have a coat, and you have a short sleeve shirt, where are you going to hide the camera? You sort of got to put it under your shirt, or try to hide it in your pocket, or carry a plastic bag with you and put it in the plastic bag. Now in the negative 45 score category, I have 2 more items, and they are number 6, limited manual controls. The capability of doing manual is there, but it is limited in how easy it is to use it. Therefore it completely makes it almost unusable. But sometimes I'd like to be manual and have that extra level of control. In that same category, I have the mode button. You have a button up there that said mode rather than a dial. I'm used to the dial. My Panasonic has a dial. It's nice because you can look really quickly at the top of the camera and see if it's set right. Then the one item in the negative 48 category is the battery life. This thing has a rather small battery. It's the Sony NP-BX1. I found out earlier today, the hard way, that you use the battery up very quickly. I think I recorded less than 40 minutes of 4K video, video outside, and the camera battery shut me off because it ran out of power. Really bad about that is plugging the USB into the camera to charging it. That took over 2 hours. That got me to a later start on this part of the segment than it should have been. It just took forever. I already went ahead and ordered a new set of 4 batteries. Of course, you know, they're clones. They're not the Sony batteries that go for about $35. Very cheap, including a charger that can charge 2 batteries at the same time. And I may make a video about that. I didn't open the box yet. It just came today. And then we have the -72 category, and we have 2 items in there. The first one is no changeable lenses. Now, I sort of got used to this with my Panasonic because it's a bridge camera and the lens itself is not changeable. The lens has a lot more capability though than this one does in terms of flexibility, including lens stabilization and a few other things I showed in the first video. It also has the 1-inch sensor, so it matches the 1-inch sensor in this one. That's why I liked this one, because now I match the same capability there. Well, unfortunately, I can't change the lenses. I can't go wide, and I can't go telephoto. I actually still have a couple of those lenses probably sitting in my box, the last camera I had. And then in that same category of -72 is the tripod mount. We're starting to get worse here. The tripod mount position is bad. Now, even my Panasonic was bad to some degree, but at least on that one, I could buy an adapter from it, from a third party, that moved the tripod mount over. It actually had a screw that would screw into the existing tripod mount and avoided the little battery compartment / battery SD compartment that is, just like on this one. But this one you can't do it. The way they mechanically did it, the actual latch to close the door overlaps the tripod mount. But being in the position that it's in, you have to take it off the tripod to change the battery and or the SD card. Now, number 1 is the worst thing on the list, but still not bad enough to prevent me from buying it. And that's the no touchscreen. And this is a sad one because all the other ones that I did here, the number 10 through 2 that I've just talked about in terms of the negative, well, there's not much Sony can do about those. They'll have to restructure physically the camera in some way to fix that, any one of those. But number 1 here, the worst one on the list, which I gave a -85 to, they should be able to fix it. The screen is already touchscreen for picking focus point or setting tracking points, depending on how you configured. It means it's a touchscreen. And the fact that it is a touchscreen, I believe it should just be a firmware change that is needed to make it also touchscreen for the menuing system. Now, I understand they may have a limit in terms of the size of that firmware. They may have chosen, though, you know, based upon quantity purchases, a chip that they just don't have a lot of coding room on it for the firmware. So doing something like making the menuing system, maybe they even tried doing it and they ran out of memory, so they sacrificed that. We'll never know. It's an important feature, Sony. If you're listening to this, don't mean to be critical, but I still bought the camera. That was one that I really had to think about. I can tell you that right now. Well, that's my review for all the features in terms of my comparison and my rating of those reviews for how they're going to either help or hinder me in terms of my YouTube content creation as a tech YouTuber. With that, let me now show you a couple of the things that I did outside earlier today, certain demonstrations that you might find useful. Well, let's take a look at bokeh mode with some houses relatively close to me. When I did it last time, I was in sort of an open field with a lot of distance between me and any houses that occurred out there. But this time I'm in a more local area. So I'll start with it being in the off mode, and I'll do a roundabout. Now I'll turn it on. So now I'm holding the camera out in front of me, pointing outward. I'm going to try zooming in to that house in the distance. Now I'm going to zoom back out again. Turn around, do it down this block, zoom in, zoom out. Now I have the sun behind me. Let me go to the left a little bit. It's early evening, so it's pretty glaring brightness, a harsh sun, and I'm going the other way. Hopefully the exposure stayed on my face as it's supposed to do. Let me turn completely around. And now I'm facing into the sun. How does that look? Anyway, those are some of the features I wanted to show while I was outdoors here. Okay, that basically concludes this video, part 2 of my Sony ZV-1 review, and particularly focusing on the features that I want to use for my content creation. Of course, showing it to you right now, some of them in vlogging mode. So hopefully you got something out of this, and if you did, you would consider subscribing to my channel. That would be very helpful if you did. Until the next time, thanks for watching and take care.